and how, from the positive perspective, it can empowering we as a researcher and many of you as a practitioner. So my outline will be as follows. I will start with introduction, where are we now, and talk about cognitive interpreting studies in the era of AI, including how AI will influence the interpreting industry and how AI will empower the cognitive interpreting research, which is closely related with everybody here who are doing the research interpreting from the cognitive perspective. And I will provide you with a little bit further thoughts and with a conclusion, with a tentative conclusion. Okay, so let's start with a brief review, and this review starts with machine translation. So I think this slide is familiar to everybody. We know the stages of machine translation developed from 1940s from the rule-based machine translation based on the linguistic information from dictionaries and the grammars of each languages like Chinese, English machine translation. So it's based on the Chinese, English grammar per se. And then moved to 1980s, we've developed a statistical machine translation. So the translation generated on the basis of statistical models and the parameters derived from bilingual text corpora. And then also further developed to the hybrid machine translation in 1990s. It's a combination of rule-based and statistical machine translation and makes the translation or target text more idiomatic and accurate. This is also a great step forward. And then move on to the neural machine translation in 2010s based on artificial neural networks to predict, here is a very important word, predict the sequence of words and modeling entire sentences in a single integrated model. And then move on to the very recent time, 2020s, and this is huge impact and phenomenal changes to machine translation. This is development of transformer deep learning architecture as a large language model with ability of contextual comprehension. So this is a brief review about the development of machine translation. Let's look at the interpreting. So interpreting can also be divided into the following four stages through the technology-mediated interpreting in 2020s. Use machine as a mediator between the interpreter and the audiences. And then move on to the 1980s, common use of personal computer and other digital devices in interpreting practice, like a digital pen. And also the emergence of term computer-assisted interpreting, CAI, which comes into our mind, and its relevant research. And move on to late 1980s, the technology-generated interpreting, the development of automatic speech recognition. This is a very familiar word and very highly appeared in our research, ASR, and the neural machine interpreting. Also the emergence of the term, we have machine interpreting, MI. And then move on to the 2020s, we call the AI augmented interpreting, with the popularity of smart mobile devices and the deep integration with ASR and machine learning. So, where are we now? A wide array of technology is available today to facilitate the delivery of interpreting services, to extend our geographical research to enhance an interpreter's preparation and performance. In addition, technologies for automating interpreting are gaining momentum. Arguably, however, we are at the point where the application and integration of technologies in professional interpreting practice needs to be reconsidered and renegotiated to ensure the sustainability of the interpreting profession. because although technology innovation has created a wealth of opportunities, it has also brought challenges. I quote here from Braun, 2019. So, artificial intelligence technology is a technology that enables computers and machines to simulate human learning, comprehension, problem solving, decision making, creativity, and autonomy. Given the right data and a clear, defined predictive task, most activities that require some sort of analysis and decision taking can be performed with different levels of quality by a machine. Let's see how AI influences interpreting industry. So the first keyword we can think of is help us to preparation, to prepare for interpreting. So in the preparatory phase, in particular, the role of specialist terminology and the strategies for its extraction and management has been considered central to improving the quality of interpretation and helping interpreters to overcome the inherent difficulties of the interpreting process. So we have AI-supported term extraction and translation, or we have AI-supported glossary list creation, management, and evaluation. Let me give you an example. So based on the ChatGPT, we can give the prompt, can you create an English-Chinese glossary list for an interpreting task on public health? And it will provide you with a list. So when you go for interpreting with public health speech, you can have the preparation about the terminologies. In process, the conception of artificial bootmate, while humans are very good at making sense of information, machines are superior in terms of memory and information retrieval capacities. An artificial bootmate aims at leveraging the ability of machines, giving the interpreter the possibility to concentrate on what she can do or what he can do best, elaborating meaning and transferring it into the target language. Here we have the foreign keywords like automatic speech recognition, language model, or user interface. The third stage is about automatic interpreting quality assessment. And I believe you have listened to Professor Han Cao's speech in the parallel presentation. Talks about automatic interpreting quality assessment. The emergence of automatic assessment raises new opportunities for evaluating interpreting performances based on entirely different procedure. And such assessment promises to be an instantaneous and inexpensive alternative to human scoring. Also, we could have AI supported with interpreter management system. The main goal is to match the right interpreters for an assignment based on factors such as language combination, level of seniority, and qualifications. So let's look at how AI can empower cognitive interpreting studies. And let me give you a definition about cognitive interpreting studies. I quote from Shaw and Harvison in 2021. Cognitive interpreting study is a field of research that examines the mental cognitive processes involved in interpreting. It does not see the cognition as limited to the brain alone, but rather taking the whole environment of the translating and interpreting individuals into account, and also the interaction between the individual and the environment. So what if we take AI into account? We can think of the following things. First is AI-assisted interpreting as a research topic. So we have ASR-based cues of specific items such as numbers and the terminologies. Previously, when we talk about some difficult factors in interpreting, we will think about numbers, names, or terminologies. Now, supported with AI, this difficulties has been removed. Okay, so this is a bit of research we can see in our recent publication, recent literature, and also ASR-based transcription and cognitive load. Okay, from the DeFrank et al. 2024, or ASR-based machine translation in interpreting. This is some research by Chen Shijia and Jan Kruger, 2023, 2024, A and B, and also by Li and Shimel, 2024. The third point is AI could be used as a research tool. Okay, so automatic interpreting quality assessment is one aspect, and the optimization of ear voice band measurement, the recent publication in interpreting by Guo Meng and Han Li, and the construction of multimodal interpreting corporal. This is published by Wang Binghua and his colleague. So I will provide you with some further thoughts about what we do with cognitive interpreting studies in the era of AI. Human translation. Let's look back to the James Holmes seminal article in 1988. He mentioned human translation breaks down into oral translation or interpreting and written translation. Numerous examples of variable research into machine and machine-aided translation are no doubt familiar to us all, and perhaps several into oral human translation. And after nearly half a century, what shall we contribute to this? Let's say machine is no longer a peripheral concept in the study and the practice of interpreting. It has become a pivotal stakeholder throughout every phase of the interpreting processes. So as a prominent and advanced technology within this trend, AI demands greater attention in interpreting studies, particularly concerning its roles, functionality, and significance in the current era. First, machine is no longer merely a medium for interpreting. Rather, it is increasingly emerging as an active stakeholder within the interpreting processes. This leads to three thoughts on cognitive interpreting study that I share with you for you to take back and think about your forthcoming research or ongoing research. The first is we can think about relocation of AI in human interpreting process. Second is the re-examination of cognitive interpreting models. And third is reconceptualization of cognitive interpreting process study. I think about these 3 points out of the ontology, epistemology, and the methodology. How should we understand the role of AI in interpreting process? So we have machine interpreting, pure machine interpreting versus human interpreting. Here, pure machine interpreting involves speech to speech and speech to text. Okay, like my speech was given the interpreting as a subtitle on the screen. How the relationship or can be compared with pure human interpreting, or human interpreting process with AI versus normal human interpreting processes. Okay, so we can think about the role of AI in interpreting process. Some recent publication about this topic, we can refer to Pohaki's 2024, is machine interpreting, published in Translation Space. The discussion on the essence of machine interpreting. And also, some colleagues look at the ethical consideration in AI-assisted interpreting. This is also worth thinking about. This article was published in Across Language Cultures. Second is the re-examination of cognitive interpreting models. So like cognitive effort distribution, we have some very classic or typical models like cognitive load theory in interpreting, or applied cognitive load theory, to be specific, in interpreting by the model the theory was developed by Sweater back to 1988. Our very famous effort model of interpreting by Professor Daniel Giller, and the cognitive load model of interpreting by Sieber. Also, we can think about the models of bilingual switching, like switching of language or language control and processing control. So some of the subtopics in these models, for example, coordination, co-activation, prediction, coding and decoding, selective language activation in interpreting should be revisited in the context of AI. And the third is we need to revisit the constructs and indicators in cognitive interpreting study. Like when we use eye tracking to study interpreting, what constructs, what indicators, or what new indicators can we think of to enrich our research? When we use behavioral indicators, when we use psychophysiological measurements, and when we look at the reception and the quality assessment, as Professor Chen Jing shared in her topic, in her speech. And we also need to reinvestigate the subtopics in cognitive interpreting studies, like translanguaging and multimodal interpreting, the role of AI augmented interpreter, different working scenario like medical interpreting, legal interpreting, or sign language interpreting. And in different settings, on-site CISI, or video remote simultaneous interpreting, or interpreting with or without text. So all these topics we need to revisit within the inclusion of AI or against the background of artificial intelligence. Okay, so I just conclude my speech due to the time. I use this title published recently by The Guardian. This is a speaker said, interpreters are wizards. At times they seem to have read my mind. AI could never complete. This is really some very interesting sharing, and let us to value the human interpreter in interpreting process. Okay, they can take all those words and sentences and reshape them on the instance, transforming my stammered over words into sublimates. Okay, so I think as a professional interpreter, we do have this capability. We do using our prediction to predict something, or even help or support speakers to finish their presentation, their speech, but sometimes AI couldn't. Okay, so AI will undoubtedly continue to play a pivotal role in interpreting, impacting both practice and research perspectives, while it is unlikely that AI will replace human interpreters in the foreseeable future. Yeah, that's my understanding and my thinking. The similarities, differences, and interactions between human and AI-driven interpreting are expected to generate rich and ongoing discussions, whether through AI augmented interpreting, where human interpreters collaborate with AI, or machine interpreting, where AI performs the interpreting tasks. The field of cognitive interpreting studies will be significantly influenced by the integration of advanced technologies. This integration not only introduces new research topics, but also provides sophisticated tools to advance our understanding and development within this field. And that's all what I want to share with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Zheng, first of all, for your perfect timing, and secondly, for your informative, interesting, constructive, and timely talk. Indeed, in this area, none of us can turn away from technology and AI. For anyone who wants further discussion, maybe Professor Zheng will be available during lunch break.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Now I'll give the floor to Professor Han, right? Professor Han Chao. Yeah, you are the chair. Next chair.
Okay, the floor is yours, Professor Han.
Okay, I'm not aware that I'm a chair actually, so. Yeah. Now let's give the floor to Professor Xiao Kairong. Professor Xiao Kairong. I would like to provide a very brief introduction to Professor Xiao. Actually, Professor Xiao is my teacher and instructor when I was studying at Southwestern University. He is a very excellent teacher of translation and translation theory. And in recent years, as we can see that Professor Xiao has stepped into the field of cognitive translation studies. And perhaps in the past 2 or 3 years, there is a book dedicated to cognitive translation studies, and there's a special issue edited by Professor Xiao and Professor Ricardo Munoz. So without further ado, let's just give the floor to Professor Xiao.
May I have my PPT? Thank you. Thank you, Professor Han. That's a very, I should like to say, very intimate introduction because he introduced some of the things between us. Well, I'd like to also say he's a very excellent student and a very excellent scholar in the field of translation studies, translation interpreting studies. Before my presentation, I'd like to first express my sincere thanks to Professor Li Defeng, Victoria Lei, and the University of Macau for the warm invitation and the hospitality. I'm very happy and honored to be at this conference. You know, this is a very special event. This marks the 10th anniversary of this conference. So we have been going through with all these different editions of this conference and this year. And this conference has been so successful with keynote speeches of different types from different perspectives. And we have very excellent and wonderful presentations in the parallel sessions. Well, I have to speed up. I have to try to save some time for the next the keynote by Professor Lu. So I think everybody is looking forward. I'd like to talk about something which many people don't want to talk about. Culture is something that we try to avoid, you know. But I still think we need to think about this. So today it's not a very scientific, systematic study, but I want to emphasize the necessity of focusing on the cultural issues. And I think this is also a kind of response to the keynote speech given by Professor Tan Yesheng yesterday. I think we have maybe some similar thinking from different perspectives. I talked about this topic at the conference a week ago in Chengdu, held at Sichuan Normal University, but I'm going to elaborate on more details of this topic. Cultural cognition. I have the topic, the title of, sorry, okay? Oh, okay, thank you. I have the title and another title, cultural cognition, because I think we need to think about some theoretical issues last night, Professor Wang Jianhua talked about the importance of theoretical building. I think we can try in some aspects. So now I think cultural cognition would help us understand how we are going to mediate the cultural differences in translation. I call this process reconceptualization. And just now, Professor Zheng Binghan mentioned reshape. That's a very good word, reshape. So it's similar, I think. Now, I'd like to talk about several aspects. First, introduction, and then to define cultural cognition, and I'd like to say some specific types of cultural reconceptualization, and then conclude. Okay. Well, I think everybody agrees that translation is interlingual. That's true. Where we're translating between languages. And it's intercultural, right? So we are dealing with different cultures. And it's cognitive. We are all talking about cognitive issues in translation. So how about when we think about the three things together? Translation is about language, about culture, and cognition. So I think translation involves the shifts, which are actually the transformation of culture. And culture itself, in my opinion, culture is cognitive. So beneath the linguistic shifts, we have the kind of change in terms of cognition. Okay. So I think language, culture, and cognition are the core elements that we need to think about. So that's why we need the perspective of cultural cognition. Okay. However, in the present scope of CTIS, Cognitive Translation Interpreting Studies, there seems to be a lack of prominence of cognitive aspects of issues. Okay. For example, in the TPR approach, we see more information processing. Well, in some other aspects, even Central Harrison or some other perspectives, we are talking about cognitive perspective. I think in most cases, we focus on the cognition that is more universal to different cultures. Okay. When we were talking about conceptual metaphor or conceptual metonymy or frame, we used to focus more on the cognition that is shared or universal to different cultures. We have not focused more on the culturally constructed conceptions. Okay. So now I'd like to try to think cognition is culture sensitive, cultural bound, and this matters a lot for translation. Okay. Let me give you one example. Now I'm going to use some examples from Hong Nou Meng. All these examples are from Hong Nou Meng. I'm reading this book and the translations a lot. So even for this single book with the translations, you can find a lot of things that are very culturally sensitive. Amitofo. We have a professor, Du Shihong, at Southwest University. In many cases, they would say, Amitofo, Amitofo, in different situations, to express different emotions. Sometimes he tried to say, wow, Amitofo means a surprise, or a kind of exclamation, or a kind of, expectation or a wish. Okay. Think about this context. We have a very famous translation by Yang Xianyi and his wife, Amida Buddha. You know something about Buddhism, right? Okay, this is a direct translation from Amitofo. Well, David Hawkes, holy name. I think we can see the difference in the belief behind these two translations, right? One is to stick to Buddhism, the other is to kind of Western belief like Christianity. Okay, and the second one, and the translation goes like Yang Xianyi, Buddha be praised. Okay, and then a holy name. For many cases, I find David Hawkes translated into holy name. So it's a kind of change of the belief system, I think. And then Yang's translation, gracious Buddha, or holy name. Okay, or Buddha be praised again. Okay, and then this time, bless you, my dear. Although different language, but I think we can see the belief behind. So a kind of calculation for Yang Xianyi translated most of the Amitofo into Amida Buddha, gracious Buddha, merciful Buddha, Buddha be praised. well, Hawks, with these translations, I think most of them as a kind of switch into a different belief system, I think. Okay. So this suggests that cultural cognition is very important. Okay. One of the difficulties, of course, the cultural difference. Well, I think culture is part of cognition, and the cognition is culture sensitive. So this offers us a new theoretical perspective. The following part, I'd like to go to try to define cultural cognition from the field of cultural linguistics and cultural cognitive linguistics. First, some scholars mention the field of cultural linguistics first by Palmer in 1996, which he thinks cultural linguistics connote a broad interest in language and culture, especially with a focus with folk knowledge and ethnographic studies. However, he said, it also emphasized the perspective on the phenomenon that is cognitive. So this is the start of cultural linguistics, and then Sheridan was one of the most important scholars to start the field of cultural linguistics. He used the capitalized CL, this field. I think this term is a little misleading because in the past we also have the field of cultural linguistics which deals with culture and language. Well, in China, even in 1990s, we have a group of scholars who study 文化语言学, cultural linguistics, and they focus on the relationship between language and culture. Now we are talking about the relationship between language, culture, and cognition. The three things, not only language and culture, but also cognition. I'm going to explain the relationship later. Okay. So this is a book to refer to by Sheridan, which emphasizes cultural linguistics, studies the features of languages that encode or instantiate culturally constructed conceptualizations. Let me explain a little bit about this. What is cultural linguistics? Of course, it's about culture. It's about how culture is conceptualized and formed into our mind. Okay, I got it. And then how they are expressed in language. So, and Professor Wen Xu put forward another term, cultural cognitive linguistics. I think that makes more sense. Okay. It talks about the cultural perspective of cognitive linguistics. Okay. As time is limited, I'm going to skip this part. Anyway, my idea is culture is cognitive phenomena, and it focuses on connective cognition, enacted cognition, and distributed cognition. Okay. Things like that. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the analytical tools of cultural cognition. That is, we can focus on cultural conceptualization. We have schemas, categories, metaphors, and Professor Tan Yesheng yesterday talked about profiling. I think that is also cultural specific. And the frames, metonymies, I think these are also culturally constructed. So I think in translation, we are actually doing a kind of cultural reconceptualization. Okay. I don't want to go into details because we don't have much time. I'd like to focus on some examples now. Okay. Let me see. Okay. For example, if you're going to talk about schemas, okay, we have different types of schemas. Okay. Fact and concept schema. It's about the cultural aspects of facts and concepts. For example, in Chinese, we have the concept of filial piety. So in Chinese, we say we have 上无亲母教养，下无姊妹扶持. Okay, it's a kind of respect for the parents. Well, in a translation, of course, this vertical space cognition is removed. Okay. And we have the person schemas. I think this translation is very interesting. Maybe I'd like to leave it for a discussion. Especially 小人, 君子, 小人. I don't know what does this read, or how would the English readers understand or accept this petty person. I think maybe we have much room for discussion. Okay. And we have Sang, Xia, etc. And emotion schemas, especially for the color red. Red is related with different emotions. Okay. So sometimes with blush, flush, here it adds shame. It's right. And everybody knows about the red Yi Hong Yuan, Yi Hong Gongzi. Well, Yang translated into red, while David Hawkes translated into green. And he even gives a very specific explanation why he translated into green. And even Dao Hongxuan, Yang translated more into red, while Hawkes Nostalgia Studio. I think they are based on different expectation of the reader's cognition. Okay. So David Hawkes said, the red list has no such connotations in English, so the reds would have tended to turn into golds and greens. But more important in the last sentence, he said, he finds there is a sort of loss here, but okay. So red is related with different cultural cognitions. I think the translators would translate differently in different contexts. Okay, that's too much. Maybe a final word, green. Green has a very different connotations in Chinese. When we say green hat, I think the Chinese people understand. What does green hat mean in Chinese, right? It means someone who has a faithful wife. Well, in the Irish culture, the green hat denotes a kind of celebration memory of the priest. Okay, so the green hat are different things. So the summary, okay, I'd like to go to the concluding remarks. So I think we can see in the book, the Routledge Handbook of Translation and Cognition, the scholars mention this commitment of cognitive translation interpretive studies, meaning, language, and cognition. I think these are core important elements, and the meaning is culturally based. So cognition might be culturally constructed, and a cultural cognition is instantiated in language. So cultural cognitive linguistics offers us a new theoretical perspective to cognitive translation interpreting studies to focus on cultural transference in translation, which we call here cultural reconceptualizations. Well, we can discuss these things from the perspectives of cultural schemas, metaphors, metonymies, categories, frames, and profilings or models, okay, as Professor Tan mentioned yesterday. I think cultural cognition might help us to understand the cultural adaptations in translation, cultural loaded text. For example, the studies carried out by Professor Tan Yesheng. I think that's a huge field, okay? And that would also offer us a kind of perspective to look at the effect and the reception of the translation. This is a very preliminary thinking about cultural cognition and translation. And criticism and comments would be welcome in any way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Xiao, for this very interesting and brief talk about the cultural cognition. I think this is a very interesting and new concept, cultural cognition, because in the past, our cognitive translation studies almost focuses on the cognition or the processes in specific contexts for specific tasks. But Professor Xiao just introduced a very new concept, cultural cognition. I think this concept will certainly draw much attention from the scholars, and there will be a lot of questions during the tea break, I think. So let's hand over to our next moderator, Professor He. Okay. He, Professor He. Oh, yeah. If Professor He is not available, I will take over. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I really have no idea. What's it about? Thank you for Professor Lee for the organization of this conference. And we know we're here. We're very familiar with Professor Luzi. Well, he have done a lot of research, and he has also published a lot in cognitive translation. I think many of you have read this publication by him. Okay, I think I will give the time to Professor Lu for his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor He. First of all, I'd like to present a warm congratulations on the 10th anniversary of IATIC conference, which was initiated by Professor Li Defeng. Actually, everyone knows that this is a very, very important academic platform for us to do the research for cognitive translation and cognitive interpreting studies. Congratulations. The topic I'd like to talk about today is an eye-tracking experiment on the relationship between source-text difficulty and production coherence in Chinese English sight interpreting. And basically 5 parts. Coherence is a very important term in systematic functional linguistics and discourse analysis. And also it has been used in translation studies to analyze the translated texts, the output of translation, even the output of interpreting. So an adequate understanding of characteristics of translation discourse makes translation study in answering theoretical and practical questions of translation process. So this means that we can combine the process research and output or production research. The translation discourse has been analyzed from various perspectives, including literacy, statistics, linguistics, pedagogical, etc. And for the coherence in sight interpreting or sight translation, source text helps interpreters break free from the original texts with the whole text provided. And here we can find the text difficulty of source text and cognitive load in sight interpreting and coherence in interpreting has has a very interactive interaction maybe. So text difficulty is an important attribute of source text, has been hypothesized in causing sight interpreting problems. This is actually the basis of our study here. So this is a framework for this study. First of all, we analyze the stimuli, the difficulty of the source text, and we try to find how much and how about the cognitive efforts will be influenced by the difficulty, the level of difficulty of source text, and then how the text difficulty influence the output, specifically the coherence of the product of start interpreting. Basically, we reviewed literature for this study from 4 perspectives. One, the process-oriented measure, which is mainly focused on cognitive effort in process. And second, the product-oriented measure, which focuses on the coherence of output or the coherence of the produced text. 3, impact of text difficulty on translation and interpreting. And also, for this research, we adopted a theory, which is called theoretical structure theory in discourse analysis for our theoretical framework. First of all, process-oriented measures, which deals with cognitive effort in start interpreting process, because a lot of research and materials revealed, I will go it very fast. And product-oriented measure coherence. This is a very important concept in discourse analysis. And also it has been borrowed by the translation studies researcher in this to analyze the output of translation. For the research of coherence, actually there are a lot of research dealing with the coherence and cohesion, mainly in the area of systematic functional linguistics. As we know that Halliday and Hassan is very famous in this field, talking about the coherence and the cohesion. There was a monograph called Coherence and Cohesion, published in 1985 and reprinted in 2014. Let's look at the impact of text difficulty on translation. Difficulty, the level of difficulty of source text influences the quality of translation output. And most experiments primarily explore the impact of text difficulty in L2, L1 translation. So few have combined an exploration of the interpreter's interpreting process and then perception of source text difficulty. So this is what we are going to explore in our research. Few have formulated source text difficulty, then can indirectly or directly causes incoherence of output and influences interpreting quality. So here, actually, we used the measures of text difficulty in reading research area to evaluate and assess the level of the difficulty of the source text. And also we applied the rhetorical structure theory proposed by Mann and Thompson in translation start in this research. This is a way to characterize text and textual relations for the purpose of text generation. It has been applied, its applied areas are closely linked with language transfer or language analysis, specifically in second language acquisition. and writing or composition research. And also, this theory has been used in the areas of computational linguistics, cross-linguistic studies, and so on. So this is a very significant and interesting research conducted by Professor Peng in China, which analyzed, the interpreters with different interpreting experience and expertise for discourse coherence of output. We can find that the trainee interpreters has a relatively later coherence structure in the output. Sorry. And expertise interpreters have a very deeper analysis, deeper usage of the discourse relations, as the picture, the lower picture shows. Now let's very briefly look at the research process. 3 questions, and we have 3 dimensions in this research. We manipulate difficulty of the text, source text, and we measure the cognitive effort by eye tracking, 3 indicators, and we analyze the coherence of output by the transcribed text. This is a very detailed framework for our analysis of the research. This is a research design. And you can find this is a standard procedure for the eye tracking experiment and participants' profiles. The assessment of the level of difficulty of source text. And let's look at the data analysis of the discussion, effects of level of the text difficulty on cognitive effort and coherence in sound interpreting. First of all, we conducted the quantitative analysis in terms of different eye tracking indicators. And we conducted linear regression of 3 eye tracking indicators to analyze the relationship between these 3 variables. This is the first one, fixation count and total fixation duration and visitor duration, respectively. So we found that complex sentence processing in sound interpreting requires more cognitive load than simple sentences. And actually, a lot of research has found this, has got these results. For example, Shreve in 2010. And also low-frequency words and abstract dysyllabic nouns during Chinese-English translation in sound interpreting significantly increased subject's cognitive effort. And the more medium and high difficulty words and more abstract words give more cognitive load to the subjects. 时间到了是吧？好 these are very detailed. We have a lot of data to present. Actually, time is limited. So also, besides the quantitative analysis, we also did the qualitative analysis based on the retrospective reports of the subjects. And subjects use the self-state or self-report crossing that to analyze that, the strategies and difficulties in that SAT interpreting process. And we combined, the coherence features of the output produced by the interpreters and combine this kind of data with the quantitative analysis to do a very profound analysis of the relationship between three variables. 杀伤性、资金、优势、大而不强、面向等等这些词So let's go look at the findings and the conclusion. The cognitive effort in the process and coherence in product of SAT interpreting were significantly correlated with text difficulty level. And two, the correlation between the amount of cognitive effort exerted and the coherence of SAT interpreting output is different for different text difficulty settings. Three, for cause of incoherence are concerned, what problems occurred in both simple and difficult texts? That is, the obstruction of SAT interpreting by difficult words exists in both difficult settings. We have some implications for the pedagogical. Pedagogical implications. One, we should train the interpreter trainees to pay more attention to the discourse information rather than the separate words or the separate sentences. So the text or the discourse awareness is very important for the interpreting trainees. Two, constantly adopting more and more paragraphs as practice materials to help students develop the ability to understand deeper context and enhance their adaptability to various kinds of text. Sorry, some words, maybe some words were missed. Thank you very much. And your comments and suggestions are sincerely welcome.
Thank you for Professor Liu for his presentation. And well, he had presented us research on the difficulty of source text. And with this, his research may contribute to interpreting assessment and the quality of production of interpreting. And so I don't know if there's a time for NQ. Okay, I will give the microphone to Professor.
Thank you very much for the exchange of ideas. Communication may be available during lunch break. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure for me to host this book launch. As you can see here, we have three influential milestones, I should say. So please allow me to introduce a little bit. So as we celebrate the publication of these books, we recognize that the advancement of any research field is marked by the publication of such milestones. I assume that all of you will agree with me because today we actually have a perfect living example here with us today, Professor Daniel Jill, right? Because his publication of the book, Basic Concepts of Models for Translators and Interpreter Training, is such a groundbreaking milestone. So each one of these milestones will mark a giant step forward and serves as a testimony that this field is vibrating and growing. So today we gather here in Macau to celebrate one such milestone together. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our first launch of such a milestone. Let's welcome Professor John Corbett and Professor Delphine Li. So the floor is yours. Shall we first ask Professor Corbett to say a little bit about the publication, please?
Okay, thank you very much for the kind introduction and for the comparison to a genuine milestone. I'm very aware that I'm the only thing standing between you and lunch, so we will be brief. But I wanted to say a few words just to celebrate this launch and how happy I feel about being here. When we started the conference, Victoria talked about her emotions, and emotion is obviously a cognitive construct. And if any of you have a personal fMRI scanner, you can bring it up, attach it to my head, and you can read the emotions that I feel at the moment. I feel joy, I feel delight, I feel relief that this project has finished. And I feel an enormous sense of gratitude to my friend and colleague, Professor Delphine Li, who invited me on board. This milestone was his idea. He contacted me 4 years ago, about more or less, and I happily came on board. And one of the reasons why I feel so joyful today is that the book is not just a snapshot of a fast-changing field. It is a testament to, I think, our friendship. And that kind of academic friendship, that collaboration is very, very important. And through this project, I not only strengthened my own academic and personal friendship with Professor Li, I also strengthened it with new people, some of the contributors, Victoria I knew, Professor Daisy Lee, some of the others in the room. The final thing that I would say is that a new friendship that I made through this project was with Eunice Guo. She was a research assistant. Without Eunice, this would not have happened.
Where's Eunice?
Where is Eunice? She's probably outside drinking coffee. But she's going to finish her PhD next year. Somebody employ her. She is gold dust. So the book is a milestone at a moment, as we have realized at this conference, when the discipline is transforming. But I don't think that it makes it obsolete. It is a snapshot of the state of the art at a particular time. About a year ago, when we were finalizing the chapters, believe it or not, that was a full year ago when we were finalizing the chapters, we looked through and thought we don't have anything on generative AI. So we quickly put a chapter together, and we're very, very delighted with that chapter. It's a good chapter. So it takes you from the beginnings of corpus-based translation studies to the brink of AI, and obviously a future is ahead of us. Now, some of the senior managers at my university are saying translation studies, interpreting studies are dead. It's finished. AI will take over. But every conference that I go to, every professional that I talk to says, no, we're democratizing the subject. The subject is exploding. Intelligent language services are exploding. So I see at every event that I go to, including this one, an incredible, bright, exciting, frightening future for the subject. So thank you for the opportunity to launch this at a very special event, and I'll hand over to Professor Lee.
Thank you, Professor John Corbett. I just want to confirm that this is really a beautiful product of many years of friendship, which was and really strengthened through the collaborative work on this manuscript. I knew, like, the time when we were finally able to submit the manuscript to the publisher, we were finally relieved. And I think probably we thought the same thing. I was saying, okay, I will not do this again. But like the other day when John came to my office, the 6 copies piled up on my table. Actually, it's a table there. So I could see the delight in his eyes. So now I kind of doubt whether, really he's done with the handbooks. We might think of another one. So I don't know. But I think really, you feel tired, you feel relieved. But then, when you see the beautiful product, then you feel you've done something and you might want to do something more. So that's how I feel now. I just want to add another quick comment. While we launched a corpus translation studies handbook at a conference of Cognition, and also I think probably I just want to sort of quote Anthony Pym, also sort of in response to John's earlier comment about translation instead, interpretation instead. Actually, Professor Anthony Pym actually endorsed this book, and in his endorsement, the very last sentence he said, corpus is not dead. Okay? So, and actually, corpus is very useful for translation process research as well. Because I have quite a few among the audience who can testify to this. The first batch of PhD students at our Center for Studies of Translation, Interpretation, and Cognition did their research project using corpus without access to eye trackers or FNIRs or, FMI. So we have like Oscar, Lin Ping, Nang Yue, Sherry, Huan Xing, and also Huan Qiuhong, Liu Xiaodong. They all did their PhD thesis with using corpus. And actually, okay, time's up. And also, I just want to mention that Nang Yue actually contributed a chapter here in this book on corpus and the study of translation. It's very relevant. Thank you.
Thank you. So, right. Corpus is not dead. I totally agree. Right. We can use this as another angle to probe into the mind of the interpreters and translators. Right. So let us welcome our second launch of the book. So the second one is actually a different style, because this is a kind of pedagogical, endeavor. As you can see, it's a textbook, but it got so many new features. So I will just leave the floor to the two main editors.
Thank you, Feng Jia, and the best advertisement in the world. It has always been a privilege and a pleasure working under the supervision of Professor Lee and working with him. But I'm not sure the feeling is mutual. So this is our textbook. Due to time limit, I will just quickly, browse the PPT slides and the cover and the introduction by the press. To quote directly from Professor Lee, it's an extremely innovative textbook. I would have humbly said a new approach. So there is internal logic in the unit because we focused on 3 C's: concept, competence, and context. The first part of each unit is theories and concepts, where students are told how to understand the translation. And then the second part of the unit is methods and skills. We try to teach skills and strategies for them to solve all kinds of problems. And for the third part of the unit, texts and context, we try to contextualize translation problems in real contexts And they are supposed to use the theory and concepts in the same unit and use the skills and methods to solve the problems. So there is an internal logic in each unit. Here are some key features like emphasis on capability building, analysis, on inquiry, and on interaction. And like here, we believe that it is designed for educators, so it could be very user-friendly for each unit. And the intended learning objectives or outcomes are specified. And so it's really an outcome-based teaching procedure. And the exercises are graded and diverse. Like here, we do have a lot of different kinds of exercises, and these exercises are graded according to different competence levels. And also, we have emphasis on the ideological and the political education. Like here, 红色翻译家故事系列 is embedded in each of the units. Oh, sorry, that's all for our book.
Okay, I just say a few words. I think, first of all, because Professor Chenkovan just quoted me as saying this book is it's extremely innovative. Don't just take my word for it. I can invite you to explore the pages in this book and then confirm with your own eyes that whether it is indeed innovative. I think Professor Chen just mentioned that first of all, I think basic idea is, I think if you look at the textbooks for translation now, they are not a monograph, but not a textbook either. So it's somewhere in between. So this book really is designed to be a textbook that teachers can use rather easily, and also it will be good for students. For example, we have, at the beginning, we have intended learning outcomes for every unit. And also we have all different kinds of exercises which are designed to cultivate the sort of critical thinking in our students. You see, for example, from the many different kinds of translation exercises, very different from the traditional ones, which is all translate the following into Chinese, translate the following sentence into English. So we have many different kinds of textbooks. And also these concepts, the 3 C's have all been really incorporated into this book. So really, indeed, I invite you to really explore the book and tell me whether I said is true or not. If it is not, please make sure you do tell me. If you are disappointed, tell me. I will do more. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, please allow me to introduce our second milestone together. As I introduced earlier, we have 2 different angles. The first one is a very heavy handbook. And the second one is for pedagogical purposes. And the third one is actually the translation of a classic. As Professor Sun Sanjun is not here, please give me a few minutes to introduce a little bit Professor Li. Well, right, so, yeah. Yeah, yes, do the same. Right, so this is about protocol analysis. As we know that this is one of the most traditional ways of online registering of people's behaviors, right? And even nowadays, we are using eye tracking or translog or fMRI, etc. We are still using protocol data to triangulate our results and also to enrich our results. I think this is, very much needed. And another perspective from me, if I'm wrong, please correct me, Professor Li, that is after the fast-growing research community of cognitive translation and interpreting after almost 10 years, thanks to Professor Li and all the experts here for your leading roles in China. Well, researchers in this area will come not only from the English language, but also from other languages. For example, participants today here may focus on French, Spanish, Portuguese, etc. Sometimes they have difficulty reading the classic written in English. So for me, this is actually a very timely translation. So I will cut myself short and give the floor to Professor Lee.
Thank you, Fenjia, very much. I have to explain a little bit. I got the book launch idea actually from John Corbett, Professor John Corbett, because our book just came out. He thought, he knew that the conference was coming. So he said, we might as well just launch it. And then Sanjun heard about the book launch, and he said, okay, why don't we launch the book as well? And I thought, okay, maybe a good idea, because this is the 10th anniversary of our Center for Studies of Translation, Interpretation, and Cognition. So I just wanted to sort of, with this book launch, to sort of show you that the center has indeed been working really hard to do research, in the broader area of translation studies, particularly in cognitive translation studies, and also been really doing quite a bit of work to promote this area of research in this part of the world. And this book was translated with the intention to help our young researchers to quickly grasp the content, the gist in the book. The original book by Erickson and Simon was a fairly big, fat book. I could, speak to that. When we have to read a big, fat book in English, probably takes a month, 2 months, and 3 months, even longer, to get hang of the techniques of verbal data as the instrument to look at translation process. So we thought, we might just translate into Chinese so that you guys can just take a quick look at it within a day or 2 or 3 or most a week. And then you can start working with the idea of using synchronous protocols in the analysis of translation process. And I think Fenjia has just spoken very beautifully about how we can triangulate, verbal data with other means such as, Camtasia, Translog. This is particularly useful for those young aspiring researchers who do not have access to more sort of modern tools such as eye tracking, FNIRS, EEG, etc. So I believe that if you really look at this book, read this book, and then design your research well with rigor, with determination, I'm sure you can produce very good publishable research results. So again, this book is for you. Thank you. Right, just one last word. This year, it's not really big. I know these books are all related to me because I said I borrowed the idea from John. I didn't have time to really plan this, but I hope that in next year and the years to come that we'll be able to really launch more books from our audience, by our audience. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, dear distinguished professors, dear colleagues and friends. So this is an exciting time, for we to have the closing ceremony and paper award. Now, I'd like to invite Professor Lee. Professor Lee. Oh, sorry. It's Professor Lu Zhi. Sorry, Professor Lee. Professor Lu Zhi, come to the stage. And to have comments, also the paper review process, self-introduction. Make a brief introduction.
Okay, brief introduction. Very, very brief. Very short. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my honor to report our process and procedures for our review of the submitted papers for awards. Totally 15 papers were submitted for the awards review. And first of all, I'd like to give a very brief overview of the general impression of these papers. These papers covered diverse and high quality empirical research topics across both translation and interpreting process, spanning languages such as English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, definitely Chinese. And these studies investigated the topics such as the impact of unfamiliar accents on simultaneous interpreting, the influence of syntactic complexity in interpreting, the impact of positive emotion on translation behavior and performance, the progression of simultaneous interpreting skills and the effects of technology like automatic speech recognition
Thank you very much for coming to Macau.